The Maple Leafs are getting set to name Auston Matthews the team's 26th captain in Maple Leaf history. What does this mean for the club, for Tavares, and for Matthews moving forward? Let's get into it on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What's going on, Dave? What a busy Tuesday it's been.
Yeah, it's NHL GMs are waking up. Everyone's starting to wake up, and it's great.
Yeah, they all got back from the long weekend, and all of a sudden it's game time. It's time to start putting in some work here. So you ended up having, the Auston Matthews bomb that got dropped Monday night. We got word that there was a press conference that was being prepared for the Maple Leafs. It'll be taking place on Wednesday. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, it'll be today at 11 a.m. And apparently the crux of the presser is to name Auston Matthews the 26th captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs in franchise history. I was kind of flabbergasted when I saw that news kind of come across my timeline that the Leafs were setting a presser and they were going to be announcing Matthews as captain, just because I don't know. Like I think I just assumed that they would let Tavares play out the year as the captain, and then this would all kind of happen next season. But this was unexpected news for me. What about you?
Well, we had this discussion not long ago, kind of how we've
talked about it, like it being a possibility, but I never actually thought it was going to come to fruition.
Like I said, it makes more sense they just waited the year, right? Why make it a thing? And then I saw, then you see the report and you're just like, they're actually going to do it. Like, you're surprised to hear it happen, but you're not surprised to see them come to this point. We kind of all understood that this was eventually something that was going to happen.
Yeah, so I guess in their point, like why delay it, I suppose. And the first thing that kind of went through my mind is this Berube kind of putting his fingerprints on things? Like, he wants to attach himself to Auston Matthews. He wants to make Auston Matthews the captain, right? Like that. Tavares was the Sheldon Keefe era, right? Now we've got the Berube era, and he knows that Matthews is the guy moving forward. I wonder how much input he had into making this decision.
Yeah, I'm curious because you always hear that coaches want to kind of implement things on their own, but apparently the reports was that it was happening kind of after the loss to Boston, that things kind of started that the shakeup was coming. It sounds maybe more like a Treliving thing, right?
Well, another guy who Treliving doesn't have an allegiance to John Tavares. Like I just think it's that whole kind of duo, I suppose, of the new regime, right? Like, it was Babcock and Dubas who brought in Tavares. It was Babcock and Dubas who made Tavares the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Those guys aren't here anymore. Like, there's no allegiance to Tavares. I mean, yes, Brendan Shanahan was around. He's still the president, the head honcho of the whole operation. But when you look at kind of the two guys who make the most, hockey operations decisions in Brad Treliving, and now with the new coach, Craig Berube, they don't have those ties to Tavares or have those strong ties. They want to hitch their wagon moving forward to Auston Matthews. And I guess I kind of commend them for making this decision sooner rather than later. I think that's the harder decision. The easy one would have been, all right, we'll just kick it down the curb and we'll wait till next year when Tavares' contract's up, whether he's back with the team or not. We know, that's just an easy transition into Matthews as captain. It's not an easy thing to do to now strip Tavares from, strip the C off his chest and give it to another guy. I'll be curious to see if Tavares is there at the press conference tomorrow to speak. Like, do you think he'll be there to
I've
talk,
been
to show his support for Matthews? Is he
I've been
expected
told
to
that
be there?
he's expected to be there. Luke Fox wrote in his story that
Would make
he's
sense.
expected to be there. And honestly, like if I was Leafs, it would be kind of something like if Tavares is good with this, he's gonna have to go full out with it, right? He's got to be there to kind of because if he's not there, some people were like, is he fully on board, right? Because we did hear that he was a part of the process, so him being there would certainly allude to him being okay with it. If he's not there, I think people are going to wonder why he wasn't there, right? In this sort of situation. We've heard of past situations where it's a lot messier. It leads to a little, I would say animosity, but players aren't exactly fully on board.
Yeah, rift in the room, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, I think back to the Sharks when they got rid of the captaincy from Joe Thornton. Just how messy that whole situation was.
Well, they did it twice. They stripped it from Marlowe to Thornton, then from Thornton to Couture, right?
Is it Couture or Pavelski?
Pavelski. Maybe it was
Might have
Pavelski.
been Pavelski.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not as bad as when Blake Wheeler just had it taken away and given to no one.
Yeah, that also was a bad situation in Winnipeg. And look, Tavares wasn't a bad captain. Like that's like this isn't a Blake Wheeler situation. This is closer to the San Jose Sharks one. But it seems like it is more amicable. And this is probably a humbling experience for Tavares to, he's the one who came home. He came back to Toronto and he was bestowed with the captaincy. He took it as a great honor. Anytime he could talk about how pleased he was to be the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, he took time out of his day to do that. That he was thrilled to be the captain of this team, but he's not stupid. He knows that this is Matthews' team on the ice, and now it's time for Matthews to kind of take that control off the ice as well. So I think that this is the right decision. Ultimately, it was one that we expected to come at some point, maybe a little sooner rather than later. But ultimately, I think it's the right call. I commend all parties for coming to this decision. I think that it just sends a clear message that this is Matthews' team going forward, and there's just some unity now up top with Matthews, Berube, and Brad Treliving. Those are the horses that this organization wants to kind of ride to the promised land.
Yeah, it just signals the shift that I know many people were expecting it a lot earlier, but let's not forget that when John Tavares was named captain, Auston Matthews had a little bit of an incident off ice that would have not been a good time to name him a captain at that point.
Yeah, and there were some speculation. I don't think it was ever proven or disproven about whether or not Matthews was in the running to get the C back then, and then yes, had that situation in Arizona, like literally a week or the week of that were announcing a captain, or like a couple weeks before that. So, some people thought that he was going to get named and then they pivoted last minutes because of that. But again, I don't believe that was ever actually proven. But eventually he's getting the C. He signed here, not necessarily long term, but he came back. He signed the largest deal in Maple Leafs history. He's going to be the highest paid player next year, and he's going to be wearing a C. And something that honestly gutted me, and I hated so much last year when I was watching. It's been the last couple of years actually. The fact that him and Mitch Marner alternated the A on their sweater. Like there were games where Matthews, I can't remember if he was the home or away, but there were games, 41 games of the year where he didn't even have a letter on his sweater. I thought it was so preposterous that was the case. And now that will not be. Now he's got a C, and it's going to be there for 82 games. And I'm excited for it. The Auston Matthews era, captaincy era, I suppose, as the 26th captain in Maple Leafs franchise history. What were kind of the defining moments for John Tavares in his time as the captain of the Maple Leaf? I think there's one that sticks out specifically. Why don't we go through some of those moments on the other side? And there is quite a bit of news around the league to get to as well. Offer sheets, Dave, offer sheets have been made. I can't believe it. We'll get into those as well. And a pending sale, possibly out in Tampa Bay. We'll get into all of that and more coming up on the other side. This is the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipt, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes guesswork out of buying tickets. They've got last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, comedy, theater events, whatever you're looking to buy them for. They've got flash deals, they've got zone deals, all in pricing. You can get your seat views, and they've got the lowest price guarantee. Or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you here as we are each and every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. This one might be coming out a little earlier if you're listening to it on Tuesday. Obviously, with the big news surrounding Auston Matthews, we decided to record it a little bit early and release it a little early so that those can maybe listen to it prior to the 11 a.m. press conference, which will be happening Wednesday morning, where Auston Matthews is expected to be announced as the 26th captain in Maple Leafs history. The 25th captain was John Tavares. And, Tavares, great captain. Every year he was here, the team made the playoffs. Did not have the playoff success, though, that the team obviously wanted and thought that they were going to have when Tavares signed here. Kind of sped up that rebuild a little bit. And they never quite lived up to expectation. When it comes to defining moments, though, like for Tavares as the captain, I think he has had one of the most defining moments in recent history with the Maple Leafs. And that was the one time they actually won a series, right? John Tavares in overtime, spins around, shoots the puck, 2-1 overtime win. The Maple Leafs make it through. They defeat the Tampa Bay Lightning 4-2, and they broke the curse, broke the 20-year streak, and went on to round two. To me, that's obviously the number one defining moment for Tavares as captain. Not even close.
I don't think anything is close. Like you look at
And
his,
it was so fitting that it was Tavares at the time too. Like the kid who came home, right? Like he was the one who had come home, and he finally is the one to break the curse for Toronto. It was all very, very fitting. Captain Toronto, Johnny Toronto, all of that. Him scoring that goal was just so storybook.
and what I always remember about that is the camera panning to Morgan Riley as if he scored the goal.
Yeah.
I was just like, did he score the goal?
Yeah.
It kind of looked like Tavares scored it. And then obviously eventually it was figured out that he scored it. It's just the picture, those moments, like that's kind of what I'll remember. And like for John Tavares too, that was a big moment as well. Because throughout his NHL career, he just did not have a lot of postseason success. Right?
Didn't he had another game, a series clinching goal with the Islanders, didn't he?
He had a second, I think in second overtime.
I think it was a series clincher though, like an OT winner that put him through to the second round. But yeah, not a whole lot of success.
Right. And so I just think that one right there, like everyone was waiting for it. There was obviously that pent up anticipation of finally winning a playoff series, right? And so you can't take that away from him. Like that's a moment I think he'll always be associated with Tavares. I'll also never forget, also in the playoffs against the Bruins, it's a game 5 in overtime, the one he set up the Matthew Knies goal in overtime.
Yeah. Yes.
Kind of big overtime moments for John Tavares in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, he had a couple big playoff moments, right? Like
Yeah.
you would hope out of an $11 million player that he comes up a couple of times at least in the postseason. That's kind of why you pay someone $11 million bucks.
Yeah.
But we're not going to get into the contract discussion today. That's not what today is all about. But yeah, like I think Tavares, like there were a couple of moments where you certainly, you sat there and you said, okay, that's why the Maple Leafs signed that guy. Like, was there anything else though that you can think of that you know, you could consider as a defining moment as his time as captain of the Maple Leafs. Like one of the things that I also think about, unfortunately, is or the bubble when he ended up getting clipped, I think clipped by
Yeah.
Corey Perry, and he had that really bad injury that looked awful, where he kind of collapsed on the ice and then fell
Mhm.
back. You saw like blood coming from his it looked like it was kind of coming from his ears or something. It was terrible. It looked awful, and luckily he was able to recover and come back, and it didn't really hinder his career. But that's another moment that I'll never forget about him and also, like, just to show what he meant for the team, like, he was the captain, and I don't know if it would have been the same way if it wasn't in a bubble, but it was just so eerie because there was nobody there in the stands, right? And it was just an empty rink, and then I remember watching Kyle Dubas run down the stairs to, like, go and make sure that he was down there for when he got taken off the ice on the stretcher to make sure he's okay and bring him to the hospital, um I don't know if that would have happened again if it was a full rink, or at least in that way where you watch him literally run down the stairs. I wouldn't consider that a positive defining
Yeah.
moment, but it is one that always will stick with me when I think about Tavares as a Maple Leaf, and then Nick Foligno fighting right afterward. And yeah, not a positive moment, but one that I'll always remember.
I also remember
That's
that
also like he's not done. Like
no, like he's still
He's
here.
he's still here. He's still a Maple Leaf. Well, as of now, he's still here. It's almost like we're eulogizing his career,
Yeah.
but it's
Well,
just I don't know how else
even
to have
even
that
if you want to
conversation.
remember like a positive moment, like it was a negative moment at first when he played against the Islanders the first time, and it was like probably one of the worst experiences I think a former player had against his former team. And
Mm,
then literally like comes back to Toronto and they like the crowd and they
standing O.
standing ovation for him, right? I
Didn't
like
he
that.
score his 1,000th point also in the island this year?
I think he got 1,000. Yeah,
I think it was on the island. He got 1,000 points, which was another awesome kind of moment that
actually,
I'll always
it was a
remember.
big. Actually, that game, like the Leafs were losing. I'm pretty sure he willed them to overtime, if
I
I'm not
think
mistaken.
so. And then they might have lost in OT, but
Yes,
definitely
yeah, I think it was like Zizekas or something like that.
yeah, but he brought it to overtime, got his 1,000th point, and they cleared the bench, and, like, that's another thing that
Yeah,
I always kinda will remember, about that. That's a good positive memory, of John Tavares. But yeah, like, I mean, he was a good captain. Ultimately, he was. They didn't win, they didn't make it to the promised land, and it's unfortunate that this is kind of how it ends. A very abrupt ending to his
mhm,
captaincy, I guess. With now next year, I assume he'll still wear an alternate. I assume he'll still be part of the leadership group
yeah,
and have an A on his sweater. I would imagine. Um, but overall, I think he's served the Maple Leafs very well as captain for was it five years,
yep,
five 6
5 years.
years, yeah, 5 years. But now it's Auston Matthews' chance. It's Auston Matthews' turn to see what he can do, and will it feel like a new era? Is like we talk about how there hasn't been much change with the group. Well, you've got a new coach, you've got a new GM, and now you've got a new captain. Like, is that enough to kind of satisfy you for wanting change within the group? You think?
Personally, no, but I do think that there can be some tangible differences in how they kind of maybe how they want to like set things out, who they're kind of rallying behind, who's supposed to be the guy that galvanizes the team. Think that's kind of what changes, but like I mean, we're talking about the same players are going to be playing the same amount of minutes likely each and every game. So that's why I still don't think it's that much of a change, but it is a change, right? Like you talk about who's now going to be the one that takes on the pressure of everything. Like Tavares did, but Matthews still did as well. So it's kind of maybe it won't feel like that big of a change, but yeah, I think it's a change, but not like to the extent of a guy actually moved on or a trade happening.
I have one question for you, but I'm gonna save it for the other side. But it'll kind of put a bow on the leadership and captaincy conversation. But I've got an interesting proposition when it comes to the alternates for this upcoming season. I'll tell you about that. And we just had a trade come through in the NHL. Also, breaking news as we're recording. We could talk about that. We could talk about the offer sheets that have been handed out as well. A couple of tough decisions for the Edmonton Oilers now over the next week because of the offer sheet situation, which I just love it. I love that we've had this happen. So we'll talk about all of those things coming up on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back into Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti. You can find the Locked On Leafs podcast wherever you get your podcast from, whether that's up on Spotify, iTunes, or whichever audio platform you use to download your pods on the go. You can also find it in video format on YouTube. We'd ask that if you would like, if you've enjoyed the show to this point, you tune in every single day and you're one of our everydayers, go ahead and subscribe. Click the notification bell as well so you know exactly when we drop new episodes each and every day here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Big news happening Wednesday. Looks like we're going to see Auston Matthews get named as the newest captain for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So John Tavares, it feels harsh to say, but stripped of the C, lack of a better word, or maybe he's relinquishing the C to Auston Matthews, if you want to put a positive spin on it. And that should be going down Wednesday at 11 a.m. There'll be a live press conference, which you could probably find, on TSN, Sportsnet. I'm sure they'll both be running those press
The Leafs will probably also do it on theirs as well.
Yeah, mapleleafs.com. You'll also be able to watch it as well, probably up on YouTube too. My proposition for you is, so Auston Matthews is taking over as the captain, right? So who gets the A? That's what I want to know now. So because last year you had Matthews and Marner were swapping like home and away. I think Matthews was on the road, and I think Marner had the A when he was at home. And then Morgan Riley, 82, like he was a foundational, alternate captain. He wore an A. How does that happen this year? What happens with the A's this year?
I think Morgan Riley still retains one of the assistant captains. And I think it's between John Tavares and Mitch Marner.
But like, are you gonna rotate it again, or are you gonna stick it on someone and call it that?
Personally, I think it's gonna be Tavares. Like, I think if you're to totally remove a letter from him would be something. Maybe he just won't care. But I think like some guys are like, I don't need a letter to be a leader, right? Yep. I think like Jake Muzzin was a leader when he was here. Joe Thornton, like guys don't necessarily need it. So yeah, I'd be curious to see. I think Riley's a lock though for me.
I agree. I think Riley should be a lock. But when it comes to Tavares and Marner, I mean, you say it would be tough to strip Tavares completely of a letter, but that would mean that you're stripping one of Mitch Marner. And when you talk about guys who they might not like that happening, Mitch Marner kind of falls under that category for me as someone who might be a little upset if you strip him of a letter.
I mean, there's also
For someone who's going into a contract year,
yeah.
also kind of a tough thing to do. And what does that say about what they think about Mitch Marner if he's not with an A on his chest after he had been for the last 5 years?
Well, I think it's just also a realization for the team that things are changing, right? And
Yeah.
but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they just decide to give Mitch the A just to avoid this potential conflict of, oh, what does this say about Marner's future now that they've taken the assistant captain away from him?
Yeah. I mean, it'll get noisy. It'll get noisy. I mean, you the guys like us and the talking heads over at the other networks. They're going to be talking about it each and every day if that's the case. And he's going to be asked about it. He's going to be asked about his contract on day one of training camp, and he's going to be asked about how it feels to not be an assistant captain this year after 5 years of being part of that group. Now I'm sure he'll be diplomatic and he'll say, we've got a group like the letter doesn't mean anything, blah blah blah. But it does mean something because years ago you came out and said that it meant a lot to, have that honor. So that's but I don't know. We'll see. It was just something I thought of. The only other way that you can make it fair, only other way is to alternate both assistant captains and you do like Tavares and Marner and then Willie and Mo. Like alternate all 4 of the captains every other game, basically, or home games, road games, and do it like that. That would be the only other way, I think, as opposed to just alternating Tavares and Marner. Maybe you also alternate Willie into that group, and now Mo, unfortunately, only gets to wear it half the time. That would be the only other thing that I thought of, at least. That was kind of my, I don't know, like my hot take.
I think they'll find a compromise that makes the most sense. Maybe it's something that gets asked during the press conference. If I was at the press conference, I would ask that.
Yes, I would also try and get that information. Okay, really quickly, I want to talk about the offer sheets before we get out of here because, man, I've been waiting for a good offer sheet to come through, and this is a ruthless offer sheet, and I don't know why we don't see this more often. Like this should be a yearly occurrence, man. If you're trying to win, this is how you get it done. So for those who haven't heard or haven't seen the news, the St. Louis Blues have offer sheeted not one but 2 Edmonton Oilers prospects. They've offer sheeted Philip Broberg. They've given him a 2-year contract worth $4.5 million AAV. And they've also offered Dylan Holloway a 2-year contract worth $2.29 million AAV. And that would require a 3rd-round compensation for Holloway and a 2nd-round compensation for Philip Broberg. I mean, why the hell? Like, why teams don't do this more often is beyond me. But Edmonton is in such a cap crunch right now. Like, they're already to a point where like they've essentially have to put Evander Kane on LTIR to start the season just to get under the cap. And now they've got to worry about getting squeezed on these 2 prospects for Broberg and for Dylan Holloway. And if they can't afford to get these contracts in, now all of a sudden you're only getting a 2nd for Broberg, who played pretty well for them in the playoffs once he got in there, and Dylan Holloway, who's a 1st-round pick a couple years ago. This guy's someone who they thought was going to come and be a quality middle 6 2-way kind of power forward for them. You're going to lose out on him for a 3rd-round pick because your cap situation's not in working order. And St. Louis saw that, and St. Louis said, you know what? Let's go and get some good young players for cheap. Like, there's no way that if you were to trade straight up, you're not getting Holloway for a 3rd-round pick. No chance in hell. This is the only way to get him that cheap. But if Edmonton's in a situation where they literally cannot sign him, then they got to let him go. And St. Louis gets a great player for very, very cheap. This is genius. It's not genius. This has been there for other GMs to do forever. I'm just happy finally someone has the stones to do something like this, and I hope we get to see a lot more of it.
I do too. Like, we see a lot of RFAs out there that probably should be signed to offer sheets. To like, it's all about doing your best to make team like beat the competition around you. In St. Louis, the Oilers are a team that you have to go against to potentially get into a playoff spot, right? Why aren't you doing this? It's so hard also to find these players, right, in the draft or even through trades. Like, as you said, you're not going to the Oilers and say, we'll give you a second round pick for Philip Broberg. They're saying, no way, right? And Edmonton, as you said, like that situation, they put themselves in this situation when, everyone was talking about how great of a situation the Oilers were. And I'm just like, they got no cap space. And like, I remember reading an article that was put up on Sportsnet about offer sheets, which players could be, our teams could be targeted for offer sheets. And the Oilers were one of them. And those two players were mentioned because if a team offers, and look, St. Louis was smart. They offered just the right amount.
Yep.
To make the compensation worth it. And it makes Edmonton have to really think about it. Like, they don't necessarily need to say, all right, we're going to let both walk. They could decide we'll keep one of them.
I think that's what will end up happening personally.
Yeah.
I would like Broberg would be a very hard player to like sign at $4.5 million for me. Like, the guy was in the American League pretty much all year, and he came up and played well in the handful of games he got in the playoffs. But at $4.5 million for a team that's already in a massive cap crunch, that's tough. That's tough to fit into your structure. You did not budget this upcoming season to fit Broberg in at $4.5 million. Like, that came out of left field. And that's what I love about it. That's what NHL GMs need to do more often to win. Like, squeeze other teams. Do this more. I mean, even for the Maple Leafs, like, dude, why the hell a team didn't go out there and just sign Nick Robertson to 1 year, $1.4 million? The Leafs aren't going to match that. You can get Nick Robertson for free for $1.4 million. There's no compensation. No compensation if you sign someone to a $1.4 million contract. Why the hell is a team like Chicago not doing that? Or a team like, Utah, or like any team that needs a young scorer, go and sign Nick Robertson 1 year, $1.4 million. Toronto's not matching it because they're not going to pay him that much money for this season. I don't believe, at least. And if they do, okay, well, you've squeezed their cap for the year. I mean, why teams don't do this more often, I do not know. But I think we're going to see one of these two players for sure. One of them will probably end up being a St. Louis Blues, and the Oilers are going to decline the contract. So basically the Oilers, for those who don't know, the Oilers have a chance to match the contract. So if they match and they're willing to pay Broberg $4.580917 million per season, they could just match the contract, and all of a sudden, okay, Broberg is signing that deal in Edmonton. Same thing with Holloway at $2.29 million. They can match that contract, or they have a week to decide, no, we can't get to there. We'll take the compensation instead. Those are the two situations and the two options the Oilers have. Either they sign these players at the numbers that St. Louis offers them at, or they take the compensation instead. The compensation is nowhere near the value that these two players have on the open market and probably, will have on your roster, but that's where it's at. So, curious to see where this ends up. We'll find out in a week. That's how long the Oilers have to make their decision on that. Also, looks like Cody Glass just got traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm seeing. I'm
guessing that's their replacement for Jeff Carter.
Possibly. I actually like the move. Like, I think, Cody Glass he just hasn't had much run in the NHL. He hasn't been given a fair shake. Didn't get much when he was sitting in was he drafted? Vegas, didn't get an opportunity, and then in Nashville, he kind of hasn't been able to flourish. But send him out to Pittsburgh. I kind of like that bet from Kyle Dubas. I like the bet when it comes to Cody Glass.
First ever draft pick by the Vegas Golden Knights.
There you go. There you go. What did he do last year? I think he played a decent amount of games last year. Like, I think he probably had a career season. Not like an overly great year, but I think he finally showed some flashes. What do you have? No, last year he had 35 points in 72 games, 14 goals. This year, yeah, only 41 games, 13 points. So not a kind of a step back this past season, but 2 years ago, 23 years old, he showed some flashes. So they're hoping to get that.
But in the AHL, when he was first traded to Nashville, he went to the AHL and he had 62 points in 68 games.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah.
I think there's
a lot of guys crush it in the AHL and struggle once they get to the NHL. But
yeah, good size. I think it's unfortunate. I think he also dealt with a lot of injuries as well as just also opportunities. So we'll see how that one plays. I'm curious to see what Nashville gets back in return to. Probably, I would say a draft pick.
Yeah, probably a cheap draft pick. Let me see if there was compensation involved. I did not see the compensation. I just saw it literally come across my message. Elliot Friedman now hearing Cody Glass being traded from Nashville to Pittsburgh. No update on what they're giving up, I guess. So we'll wait on that.
And also curious note about the offer sheets, because what threw me off this morning too was that the Penguins and the Blues made a trade, and I noticed that it was for the Blues to get their own pick back. And I'm like, that's a weird trade. And like, the only reason why I can see them doing that is if maybe they're going for an offer sheet, and literally like 2 minutes later, that's when the offer sheet was announced for Broberg and Holloway.
What did they trade? I didn't even notice that this morning. What did they trade this morning?
So the Blues traded their own second round pick. I'll get you the full details, so I don't want to mess up the full details. So the Penguins acquired the Blues 2026 second round pick and the third round pick that the Blues got from the Senators in the Matthew Joseph trade for their own 2025 second round pick back.
Oh, so they had to give up an additional third rounder to get that pick back.
I think they got a fifth rounder kicked into the deal too, but yeah, they had to pay a second and a third to get their second back.
Hey, well,
because as you know, you need your own picks to make the deals.
If it turns into Broberg, hey,
you'll do that.
You're happy. You'll do that for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. All right, good stuff. Busy day in the NHL. It's a fun episode. We got to report on things actually happening. Doesn't happen too often here in August. Means that we're getting close, buddy. We're getting close. Just a few more weeks until we get to Labor Day, and then it's just a couple weeks till then till we get to training camp, and a couple weeks after that, it's the real thing. Puck drop for night one of the NHL season. So it's coming in. It's coming in fast. Looks like everyone's done from their vacations up in Muskoka, and we're ready to make some moves. Maple Leafs, they'll be announcing a new captain Wednesday, 11 a.m. We will come back and talk all about it on Friday. Until then, keep it locked right here on the Locked On Leafs podcast.